the people on Zoom joining us today. So thank you all for coming out. My name is Juana. I've met some of you guys virtually. I've met some of you all in person. I've met some of you all via email. And my boss is telling me to take my mask off, which, cool, is that better? Awesome, awesome. So good to meet you all in person for those I have not met. Good to meet you all who I have not met. So, and welcome to tonight's event. So, this is our big kickoff for the neighborhood planning effort that Single Development Corporation, in partnership with our planning department for the city, will be hosting for those 6 neighborhoods in the Project Connect area. So I just wanted to kick it off and say welcome. I know you guys will be doing other things tonight. We're going to couch Netflix and et cetera, that you chose to say. So I appreciate you guys spending some time with us today. So we go to the next slide. While he's doing that, I just want to let you all know this is really not the venue that we had anticipated. I know it's a little presentation like I'm really speaking at you guys a lot. There's a big stage behind me. So I do apologize about that in advance. Moving forward, we'll prefer a venue that's more allows for more interaction among myself as well as your fellow residents. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Well, I didn't really do an introduction for myself, right? So I'm actually moving back to St. Louis. I'm the new project manager for Project Connect. I lived in St. Louis about 3 years ago. Coming to you guys from Boston, Massachusetts, and people think I'm crazy for moving back. I tell them that St. Louis has a lot of opportunities, and there is a lot of potential in the body for St. Louis. So I'm very excited to be back. I always tell people I don't know a lot about the neighborhoods, the 6 different neighborhoods. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to learn more about the neighborhoods, and I'm excited to learn from you all here about what you like about your neighborhood and what are some challenges, and hopefully we can move forward with some of those challenges. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Sound good? So today's agenda, I want to welcome. We're going to do a little bit of housekeeping for those who are on Zoom. We're going to do introductions. I got some friends here in the room from the city as well as from my department, so I'll do introductions for that. And then we're going to do a high-level overview of the neighborhood planning process, i.e. why we're here today. And then we're going to go into the neighborhood planning process specific to the Project Connect neighborhoods. And then we're going to go through a intensive timeline question and answer session. I know you guys have questions. We're going to try to keep this presentation super short because we want to maximize the time that you all have to provide your comments, provide your input, provide your questions. Next slide. Awesome. So housekeeping, again, shout out to the people on Zoom. If you are in the room, you probably already found the restroom. So just out the door here to my left, and see to your right when you went out. Those are the restrooms. For the people on Zoom, you guys are automatically muted, and I don't know if you guys can actually see me. You guys are already muted, so if you do have questions, you can use the question and answer feature. It is going to be on the bottom of your screen. If you want to make comments, I think some of you have already made comments using that chat function up there. Definitely throw out your comments, questions in the chat as well. Lance is he's our deputy director at SLDC, and he is volunteered to be the tech guy for the night, so definitely kudos to him. And if you want to ask a question out loud, if you are online, feel free to raise your hand. You go to the 3 dots at the bottom of the screen and hit that. There should be a raise hand button, and Lance will be there to answer the call. So, next slide. Awesome. So I joke with my colleagues that this is the Mr. Rogers side. Hello, neighbor. Just want to take a pause here, and we are going to do a really quick poll for you all. The purpose of this is there are a lot of people who are in this room. There are a lot of people who are not in this room, so we just want to make sure that throughout this process we are capturing all the people who are not in this room, and hopefully you all can help us to understand who is not represented, so that moving forward we can figure out how to strategize about their outreach and how to get them involved and informed about this process. So I got a couple colleagues here who are going to be walking around. Some of you guys have already completed the survey. That was at the entrance table, so I got a couple colleagues who are going to walk around. We're going to hand out a survey here. The survey is just going to ask a couple of brief questions. I know that surveys are not anyone's best friend. I went to undergrad, grad school, so I'm like obligated to take whatever surveys to research purposes, but this is not for research purposes. You do not have to fill out the survey if you are absolutely against it, but it will definitely help us to do our job better and like I said, to better reach out to those who are not in the room. So that survey is also going to be coming around just to get an understanding of those who want to be more involved in the neighborhood planning process. We are going to explain what the neighborhood planning process is for those who want to get more engaged, more involved, and perhaps serve on committee. We're going to, that's an opportunity for you to indicate how you want to be involved. So that is coming around in just a second, and we're going to pause here in just about 5 minutes for folks to fill that out. I had some jazz music playing earlier. You guys like jazz music?
Right.
Yeah, you guys like jazz music. All right, hit the jazz hands.
About the QR code.
Oh, sure, yes, for Tech folks, there is a QR code on some of the flyers we have been distributing. If you take your camera, the camera on your phone, just hit that camera button and hover your camera over the QR code. It will scan, it will automatically pop up, and you can hit the link, and it'll go straight to the survey, and you can take the survey online. For those who are on the Zoom, there should be a link to the survey that you can take online. Does everybody know everyone in the room? There's some people in the back there who may not know some of you guys. We're going to do a quick poll just to see who is actually in the room, who's behind you, who's in front of you, so we can get an understanding of, this is the record hood part of the presentation. We do this we do this like high school kids, obviously, so record hood. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a quick poll. So you guys got those white clickers? Yes. If you're in person, you have a white clicker. It should be working. It has a battery to it. I asked you guys, which neighborhood are you representing here today? Of the 6 neighborhoods that are the Project Connect neighborhoods, which neighborhood are you representing? All you have to do if you are in person, you just take that white clicker and you hit A, B, C, D, E, F, or G to vote. If you are online, it is a little bit more complicated, but I'll explain to you. So there is a link that Lance is going to post there in the chat. And then you just enter the session ID that's on the screen and you can vote here with us. And this is kind of cool. We're going to see the results live. This is supposed to be the fun part of the event. But I'm a little laughing, so. Make it easy. Did we get our votes in? A, B, C, D, E. All you gotta do is hit it. Once you're done, you're done. Awesome. I think we can see the big reveal. Did everybody vote? I guess we'll find out. Hit that next slide for me, Liz. There we go. Look at that. We got JDL coming out on top today, representing us here today. We got Old North St. Louis coming in second. We got Ty between St. Louis Place. We got some other folks in the room, which is awesome. Always looking at folks who are not in those neighborhoods but are interested in seeing what's going on. The Park Square is here as well. We are missing Columbus Square. So,
No.
You
better know.
Oh, I hear yes.
And Park Square coming real low too.
They are coming real low. So what this tells us is tells us that we need to do more outreach, right? We need to do more outreach to folks who live in Park Square and Columbus Square. I'll explain how we're going to roll out that process a little bit later during the presentation. But this is not sort of a one-all event. So that being said, I appreciate you guys doing the poll. Make sure you turn in those clickers on your way out. I'm going to hand this over and we're going to do some introductions to folks in the room too. Hit that next slide, so So now we have an understanding of who you guys are. Just want to give you guys a quick overview of who we are. So I mentioned that I'm the project manager for Project Connect, the St. Louis Development Corporation. St. Louis Development Corporation will be leading this neighborhood planning process with support from the Planning and Urban Design Agency here. And then we got a couple of consultants as well. So for everyone who's at SLDC, I will point them out, just raise your hand. I got Lance Knuckles, Deputy Director, Strategic Growth and Development. Woo! Awesome. Neil Richardson first. Typically how the order goes. He's the Executive Director for St. Louis Development Corporation. So definitely thanks for being here. Anita Robinson, so you guys met Anita. She is the outgoing project manager for the Project Connect initiative. She's going all the way from Chocolate City, DC. She just moved away from my series out to see her move away to have it happen each day. EDA, we got EDA folks in the room here. Don Rowe is here. Where's Don? See Don back. You know, as well as the planning executive. And then you've got John Roper in the back here. So John, who's been managing the introductions and the wellness table stuff. So we got some consultants here joining us online as Russell from Stantec. I think some of you all know Russell. He's been involved in this from the very beginning. So very definitely happy to have him online. And then we have Jason here. Jason's been heading out those surveys and then doing everything in between. So, all right, awesome. So that being said, I'm going to kick it off to Cecilia. She's going to explain more about what neighborhood planning is, and then for Nina to follow her and explain what that means for the Project Connect and the Project Mission.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for joining us here tonight. We are here to support SLDC in their effort around the Project Connect neighborhoods. That is the pink cluster you see there, but there are so many other neighborhoods. We have 79. These neighborhood boundaries have been adopted by our planning commission, and so those are static. They don't change on like boards or city blocks, census blocks. All those things change. These are static, so they're stable, and we're excited to be able to use them as the building blocks for the city. So 79 neighborhoods. If we go ahead and go to the next slide here. What is a neighborhood plan? It's a lot of things. Do you guys feel like have you heard the words neighborhood and plan together in a sentence before? Yeah, right? It's essentially a guide for development and resources for a neighborhood. So what is it that the neighborhood is going to see in the future? Is it, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the road, we have to plan for that. We have to be intentional about making sure that those things are feasible and that we are doing it inclusively. So that hasn't always been the case, but that's the goal here. So it is not just a product. It's not just this document at the end of the road that we put down and wait until we do it again 15 and some cases 20 years later. We are putting together a program that will allow us to begin neighborhood planning in a sustainable way. So we have 79 neighborhoods, and we have grouped those neighborhoods together into planning areas. There are 31 planning areas. The Project Connect neighborhoods, the 6 neighborhoods, is one planning area. We want to do it in a way that we can do all of the neighborhood plans within a short amount of time. Our goal is 5 to 7 years. That way, when we are done with those plans, we can come back to the forefront and say, what's happening in these neighborhoods? Are we seeing what we wanted to see? What aren't we seeing? What are the hurdles? Are there visions that have changed? Are there goals that have changed? And we can start making this a process that we're doing continually and, being able to be a sounding board on a regular basis instead of reinventing the wheel every 20 years. So this is the first planning area that is about to kick off, and we're excited to work with SLDC and Project Connect to do just that. So if we go to the next slide. This is a very messy, unreadable process flow chart that I would never expect you guys to read. But essentially, if you dig really deep into it, it shows how this process is going to work. We've spent a lot of time talking to folks, professionals, and people in the neighborhood CDCs, neighborhood associations. There's no way we're going to be able to read that, but we will send you the link, and you guys can dig in deep if you want to.
So into this city 50 years of it, so no matter which way you throw it, I'll know.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have developed this strategy in a way that we are trying to do planning better. Historically, we've seen planning done very top down, or very bottom up, and neither one has been super successful because top down does not consider what the neighborhood wants, what the people of that neighborhood want to see. Bottom up has been very difficult to get the folks at city government and in city government at the table to make sure that those strategies that come out of what the community wants to see are actually feasible. So we want to make this a strategy where we are working from the middle out. So we're developing relationships with communities so that we can develop those strategies in tandem, work with departments and work with communities to make sure that those recommendations are actually feasible to implement in the long run. So there's a few things that we have developed in our planning process flow chart. It's a very general guide. There are lots of things you can tailor to what the community wants to see and how they want to see it move forward. But if you hit next for me, there's a few principles I'm just going to hit on real quick one more time. Well, that is a little skewed, but the idea is that there is a heavy lead-in time on the front end of this planning process. We're not diving right in to ask you to trust us and get right to the meat of what you want to see and hear and expect you guys to tell us everything that's on your mind. We have developed this process in a way that the front end has a lot of time and energy spent in building relationships. One of the big reasons that Project Connect is actually the one leading this effort is because they have already spent a lot of time building relationships in these neighborhoods. And so we're able to work with them to make sure that they're following this process, but we want to make sure that there's still a time to introduce both the process and the people who are behind the process so that everyone can be in tandem working towards the same goal. And then there's a courting phase. No one, starts engaging or no one gets engaged before they actually skate, right? So we have a period of time where we're just dating, we're talking about what the process entails, we're trying to get people involved in leadership for this process. We want residents to be at the table. So we have a good amount of time allotted to all of this, which is unusual for a neighborhood planning process. So if we go to the next slide. You see those stars in each of the boxes. So each one of those indicates a feedback loop. So if you hit for me twice, please. Thank you. So that's a zoom in of one of them. Essentially, we have integrated feedback loops into each phase so that the community is the one telling us if they're ready to move forward or not. And so, we're asking questions like, did we get enough feedback? Did we hear from a representative from the community? Did we meet your goals? Does this sound right? Is the deliverable accurate to what you know to be your neighborhood and what the neighborhood wants to see? If any of the answers are no, we have a recourse. We can go back, do more engagement. We can do targeted engagement. We can have working conversations with the planning committee. All of those things will allow us to kind of make sure that we're truing up every step of the way. Go to the next slide. And hit for me 2 more times. So the rest, I guess one more thing about the way that we built this is that our intent is to really tailor the consultants to what the community wants to see. Most of the time you see a consulting team come in at the forefront and they kind of assume what the community needs. This strategy is really built to build a relationship between the community and the city to understand what the community needs, and then bring in consultants and experts to help build recommendations on that. So we're tailoring the team that's going to respond to those on what the community actually needs and what they're saying are the priorities. So that's one thing. But other than that, the rest of the planning process is very similar. We do want to make sure that we're prioritizing things so that when the city is looking at allocating funding, we know where the community wants to see that funding put. If developers or nonprofit organizations are also trying to figure out what the community plan is, they know they also have a roadmap for that as well. This is a very simplified version of what I just showed you. So doesn't have all of the feedback loops, doesn't show all the complicated things, but this is a general timeline. We're expecting that these will take anywhere from 14 to 22 months. And the reason that window is so large is because of those feedback loops. We really want to be flexible and make sure that we're allowing the time people understand that that's important to making sure that these plans are truly reflected in the community. So the next slide. The planning selection process. So you guys probably are aware of words like steering committee or neighborhood planning committee and things like that. This is that. But we have done it in a way where we're developing a process in which we're actually using an application process and random selection. And we're doing it in a way that we are also considering the demographics of the community so that the committee that ends up serving for that 14 to 22 months is actually reflective of the community. So we're looking at the demographics of the community and matching up the committee so that we're making sure that voice is representative of who is in the community. And I think that wraps it up. It was a lot of information, but I am going to hand it off to Tornita. Happy to answer questions, also happy to talk offline and give more information as you desire. I will note that, obviously we're here to work with Project Connect and with SLGC to make sure that this is the process that you all are experiencing. But if at any point in time there is an issue or a difficulty with what you guys are hearing or seeing or anything like that, we want to hear about it because we're building this in a way that we can be nimble and respond to those things and make sure that it's done correctly. So thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. It is awesome to see some familiar issues in the audience. I see a few running. So it's nice to come to see you all in person. I know we've been virtually throughout the time I've been here at SLGC. So what is our plan? So first, again, shout out to the neighborhood working leaders because they were the first group to actually see this, our plan. The goal of our plan is to make sure that we understand that the focus on these 6 individual neighborhoods. And so what are those 6 neighborhoods? Those neighborhoods that will be represented will be Jeff Vanderbilt, St. Louis Place, Parsons, Columbus Square, Old York, and Hyde Park. And I want to make sure that we're clear on the fact that this is not going to be one large neighborhood plan. Each of these 6 neighborhoods are going to have their own individual plans. Of course, you recognize that there are going to be some overlaps in some of these focus areas. And the goal is that as we develop each of these plans, those plans will speak to each other, where those overlaps happen within our neighborhoods. And the biggest thing about this is that this is a community-led process. This is not us needing it. This is just us hoping and supporting you all to make those changes that you want to see within your communities and making sure, sorry, see, and I knew to take my mask off, but everything else is just like, wow, I'm yelling in my head right now. So the goal is that this is a community-led initiative that is meant to shape policy and guide growth for following back decades. I know that right now there are some existing plans that exist, but the goal is that, each one of these is going to speak to the current and future needs of each of these 6 individual neighborhoods. So Cecilia spoke to the fact that this plan typically is meant to take 14 to 22 months, right? But this is 6 individual neighborhoods. And so we expect this process to actually take anywhere from 18 to 24 months. And then after it's completed, and it has to go through the adoption process through the planning committee. And so we're looking at a little bit larger timeline than the framework is mentioned for most of the other 79 neighborhoods. However, the goal is to make sure that we not only get it done, but we get it done right and make sure, again, that this is led by you all. So I'm actually going to turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Neil Richardson, Executive Director of St. Louis Development Corporation, lifelong resident of the city of St. Louis. And I'm very honored to be before you all tonight. I want to first recognize some of the SLDC members that have put this work together, as well as my great friend Don Rowe with the Planning and Urban Design Agency and all of the great work and his leadership. As we stand today, we have a strong alignment of projects. As we look at the Project Connect Action Plan, we understand how NGA is now investing $1.75 billion into North St. Louis City, as well as bringing 3,000 plus jobs. While that's quite impressive, at the end of the day, as the city development, as the economic development arm of the city of St. Louis, our first and foremost priority are the residents. How will that investment ultimately impact you all? And that's why we're here today. And so as the mayor, Tashara O. Jones, and myself are working together on our economic justice action plan, we're looking to allocate the ARPA dollars that we receive in over $500 million, also the money that we receive in the Round settlement, to be able to understand how do we allocate resources to support the residents that have been historically invested in our neighborhoods. I want to recognize and understand that as a result of the NGA development in these neighborhoods, there was displacement that happened. So I want to recognize that. But also we must recognize that we have to do better moving forward to ensure that the residents, the businesses that have been committed to these neighborhoods for generations and decades, ultimately reap the greatest economic benefit from the investment of NGA, as well as the upcoming and ongoing investments that we will make. And to achieve that, it requires us to really listen, learn, and respond to the needs of the individuals that live in these communities today. And as we continue to build the future of these neighborhoods, how do we ensure that it includes opportunities for economic mobility for those who have been committed for decades to these areas? We have funding opportunities that I spoke to in regards to our ARPA dollars, as well as infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bill that will be passed. We are really going to be focused on 4 key areas within our economic justice action plan. Lance has reminded me to inform you all that we have a survey going out right now around the economic justice action plan that you all can provide feedback on regarding how do we allocate resources towards 4 key pillars: workforce development, business empowerment, neighborhood transformation, and ultimately, how do we implement equitable development practices and principles to ensure that we are deploying tools that create equitable economic development outcomes in which all of our residents, our businesses, and neighborhoods have the greatest opportunity to thrive. And so as today is one of the first days that I've had the opportunity in my new role to engage with residents, I'm excited to hear your feedback. I'm excited to hear your questions. I'm excited to hear what do you desire to see in order for us to really create through this neighborhood plan investments that work for the benefit of you all. So with that, I'll pass it over to the next speaker. Lance, who's up next?
All right.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And that survey that you referenced, we actually have it out front in the world, and we can make sure that we get that to you before you leave here today. So where are we now, right? Right now we're in this room, for the kickoff of this entire process. This marks the start of our introduction phase. And the plan is that introduction doesn't stop just now. Whenever we're working with us, being introduced to this months back now, right? But the goal is that the introduction is going to continue. This is the first big push in regards to introduction, but at the beginning of the year, we want to really engage about this thing. We want to make sure that when we start trying to get people to be a part and engage in this process, that engagement is going to look like various forms. One of the main forms is going to be that advisory community that Cecilia mentioned prior. And so those applications will drop early next year. Hopefully, everyone in the room has left contacts to be a part of that or be engaged with us in some aspect later down the road. But if you have not signed in at this point, please do. Make sure you use contact information so that we can make sure that you stay informed about what's going on about that advisory community as well as other forms of engagement. So Cecilia walked us through the entire framework. And like I said, this process is going to take anywhere from 18 to 24 months. So while we're starting now, we're currently in the introduction phase, we expect this to potentially not be completed. And I'm not talking about after it's adopted. I mean, before the adoption period. We don't expect this to be completed until late 2023. And so it's going to be a process. It's going to take time. It's going to take some dedication from our team, PA, our consultants, and most importantly, you all, because we need it. It has to be a collaborative effort in order to make sure that it's done properly. We don't want to rush through it. We want to make sure that we are getting all the information and figuring out the key areas that need to be focused on within each individual plan. Thank you. And I'm going to pass it over to John.
Awesome. Hey, a lot of passing of the mic tonight, but they wanted to get my face out here as the new project manager and to make sure you guys are aware of who I am moving forward. So the key question, this is a $1 million question. So why should I care, right? Why should you care and what's next, right? So we have those surveys that you guys have completed. That's going to tell us who's really interested in being, if you're not already, who's really interested in being a leader in this process. If you're interested in being on an advisory committee, the advisory committee will help steer direction of this process as well as help influence decisions throughout the neighborhood planning process. And then there are going to be other ways to get involved as well. If you're interested in getting involved, but maybe not ready to commit to being on a committee, there will be other ways to provide your input, to provide your expertise, to provide your skill set to this process. So that is sort of the what's next. I think Brittany did a really good job of explaining the why part of that too, right? Like why you should care. Because at the end of the day, it's about what you all want to see. That's the essence of community driven and community led. That's pretty much it from us. I felt like that was a long presentation, so I'm going to have to adjust as we were rolling out the presentation to the specific neighborhoods. We're going to have to shorten that down a little bit more because, as Jill said, we're excited to hear from you all, your questions, your comments, your concerns. Please don't hesitate to come up to the mic here. If you are on the Zoom link, put those questions in the question answer or the chat. So I'll stop talking and we're going to go ahead and facilitate the Q&A. So if there's a brave soul that has a burning question, either yell it out, stand up, yell it out, or come to the mic. When you come up here, please introduce your name and what neighborhood you represent, and then your question.
Good evening. Good evening, my name is Sheila Berry, and so currently I represent Jeff Beverly. Don't know how my block ended up having. I think you heard it. I've got several questions. The first one is, okay, will the neighbors be able to develop their own area? Meaning, can we have some land donated, build our own homes without tax credit? The second thing is this. He mentioned that there was displacement. Actually, there was not displacement. Those people were bought out, and they had some choices in terms of what they were bought out. They were bought out at minimum rate. So he talked about funding, or he talked about workforce development. And so, does the community college participate in workforce development? For me, I can count about 10 workforce development programs that kind of sit dormant, even right across the street in this city. That building is empty, and they have plenty of workforce development. So I don't think for this area, we need workforce development. This area comprises primarily of retirees. They've already served their time, so they're not interested in going back to work. At least that's my opinion. So then he talked about this.
Can I pause you there? Yes. I'm young, but I got a short-term memory.
Okay, so the first question that I want to know is when you start talking about neighborhood plan, will we be able to develop our own areas? For me, I am the only person who lives on my block, so I would like to have land, get some tax credits, and put some very, very nice market rate homes in my area. That's what I would like to see. And as well as I mentioned, this area is full of seniors. A lot of them have the older homes, but they would be willing to get maybe a single level ranch home in the same area.
That's a great question. And for those of you who don't know, I actually used to work in the city of East St. Louis, part of West St. Louis, and there were many opportunities where I would ride down the block and there was like one single citizen on the entire block, right? So how do we make sure that we are giving people ownership of assets? That's what I mean. I would say first and foremost, I've been at SLDC for about 4 weeks now. I think this is the 4th week. So I personally won't be able to answer a lot of those questions, but I'm going to learn from you all over time. I'll be able to answer some of those questions. So I'll be handing off the mic to some of my colleagues who can answer the question more directly since I'm pretty new here. So I think I will let, your question is related to what Neil has been speaking to. So I think I'll let Neil answer this.
Right. So we, as we were going through the neighborhood planning process, we are going to have a land assembly process that we go through. And we will have properties that we will keep available, that will not be land banked, that we ensure that many of the residents that live in these neighborhoods that have an opportunity to rebuild. In addition to that, we also plan to work with nonprofits and other community-based organizations. I know Hyde Park Neighborhood Association, Old North has organizations that are geared and ready to start that development to respond to the needs of the residents, creating accessible home ownership opportunities for housing for seniors and otherwise. And so those are some of the plans that we're hoping to support through this engagement.
Okay, so let me repeat that. The seniors in my area are not looking for affordable homes, and they already own their homes free and clear. What they want to do is what we call downsize. So currently the seniors in my area, they have large homes. And so those homes comprise of 6 buildings and a lot of shade. So they're willing to maybe sell their home for a premium price and then rebuild in the same neighborhood, something that's more of a ranch level. So they're looking for affordable housing, or they want to get a premium so they'll be able to afford the new home. And so then my second question is, did you guys talk about using some of the stimulus dollars and then the ranch dollars, veteran power? But how can people in the neighborhood access funding? And as far as we don't live in Hyde Park, and so there are no nonprofits where I live at. So I live in Hyde Park and I live in Old North. There are no nonprofits in my area. And so I'm capable of starting a nonprofit issue, but I can partner with somebody else. So I think, how do we access those funds that the city has allocated?
So we'll have request for proposals that we'll put out for our citywide housing development fund, as well as for business empowerment. So we will have those funds available. We'll have requests for proposals for many of the residents. You don't have to be a business owner in order to respond to those proposals. So those will be released coming.
Okay, so when you say request for proposals, does it require that you have to have like a bond, a surety bond, $1 million bond,
No.
insurance? Can it be just a simple application that, the seniors that would have to fill out that, say, hey, I own this house, I own several lots in my neighborhood, I would like to, downsize, sell this home for a premium rate, and then build something new and stay in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, so we have a LRA, or land
Right.
authority, that works with homeowners that are in neighborhoods to help with exactly those cases. You don't need to have a bond, you don't need to have all of those things currently in place, but we can work with you through that application process to get it.
Well, with LRA, again, in terms of before they allow you to buy a home, a lot, you have to have your funding in place. So you have to go to a bank and you have to have your funding in place. Someone who is retired, no longer income is limited. So they're not able, they can, but they're not able to go to a bank and say that I can develop this project because banks look at, here's what banks look at. Banks look at income and they look at your ability to be able to repay the loan. Someone in their 70s or their 80s, they don't consider a reliable student that person has paid off their home and they own the land real here. So what people are looking for is to be able to access the funds because they've already demonstrated that they can own a home, they can maintain the land. They're looking for something that they can be able to fund the rebuild of the neighborhood.
Right, and that's why I was saying we can have that discussion.
Okay.
And we'll help you through that process.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, come on.
St. Louis Place neighborhood. I think in this process it'll be room to say a lot of what I would like to say. For me, it's helpful today to put a big bracket around this. And maybe we should start every proposal with a lot of these problems wouldn't exist if we didn't have this village. I just want to ask all to try to keep in mind. That's an ultimate piece that we need to address this.
And so that's why we said workforce development is key of this. And I know every neighborhood has very different economic challenges, but what we also understand is that people are not making a living wage and not having access to job opportunities, that they will stay in a place of poverty. And so I'm not saying that income will change everybody's outcome. There's other services, mental health and otherwise, that we have to provide. But starting with the living wage is definitely a place in which we can create economic mobility.
Awesome. Justin, I knew you were gonna have some questions. Always love your questions, man. All right, what do you got?
I appreciate it. First of all, comment. I know concrete city, reclaim a lot of third industrial age, commercial, and industrial spaces and incorporate that into something like Mr. Richardson just said, something like workforce. That would, because this is not just going to come into this space. Like I'm saying, we have the sub coming, that's going to help people. So how do we create the spaces for those people to continue to grow in this space? And also to bring some new life into our neighborhoods. Like I'm sure when our neighbors talk about neighborhoods for retirees and things of that nature, how do we co-create something that brings them as well as young people, young professionals, to bring our communities back and get something nice and different that we all like?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think you guys are asking a lot of questions that are really going to be fleshed out throughout the neighborhood planning process, right? So like, I can't sit here and say that like we have all these answers, right? The SLBC has all these answers, right? There's certain things that we can offer, but throughout this process, it's like, if you got ideas, like join one of the committees, like throw it out there, let's get it into the plan, you know what I mean? So I'll say that first and foremost, definitely, Jason here is taking some notes down for us, so we want to capture, some of the ideas that have already been said, right? As well as some of the questions that you got, but I think some of those are really going to be like worked out, like nitty-gritty working out the details and some of those planning things. But I think Neil, if you had anything else to say to that. Okay. Yeah, did that answer the question?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, I'll take you guys here and then we're gonna pause. We're gonna go to the Zoom after that. So, hey, how's it going? Good, good. Good to see you again. Oh, you're like kind of tall and the mic is short, so.
Yeah, I think
No, that's a good question. So his question is, he currently attends the Shanghai School. He's on the basketball team. He's on, you practiced earlier? Nice, okay, so he's on the basketball team. He's practicing with the team earlier. His question is, will this process actually improve the surrounding area, right? I want to say yes, right? At the same time, it depends on the feedback that we get from you all, right? So this is a community-driven, community-led process. And so everything that goes into the neighborhood plan will come from you all. So if you tell me, man, that street is a horrible street, you really need to improve that street, right? That has to go into the neighborhood plan in order for us to execute on it, right? Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you? Okay.
I love everybody know my background and all those too. So I would say we need your feedback because we're building this community for you and generations that are to come. And so if you are looking for other activities around the neighborhood and you say, this is what actually want to drive interest. We need another, not a basketball court, but we want a chess park. But we want an area in which we can just convene a safe space for me to hang out with my friends. Like that's the type of feedback that we need in order to have the plan that works for everybody. Because we can get feedback just from the older seniors in the neighborhood, but how do we ensure that works for you? And just like we can get feedback from you, but also we have seniors. So it's all of these different decision points that we have to make, but without the feedback that you want to say, we can't incorporate that into the plan. So whenever you see these opportunities, make sure that your voice is heard because you are going to be the change that makes our community better. So I appreciate you coming up and having that today. Yeah.
Okay, we are going to go to the folks on Zoom. Can we get some questions from the folks on Zoom?
We have a hand raised.
Okay, well, Liz is figuring that out. We got another question from the folks who are in person. Are you able to come up, or I don't know if this actually goes in?
Actually, I think I can speak loud.
Okay, cool, go for it.
My name is Robin Rice. I grew up in St. Louis Park Place. I haven't lived there for years, but I still love the neighborhood. I have a passion for it. So my question is, when I was looking at the chart and when you did the vote, and you had Jeff Vanderloo and Cross Square area, and you had very low attendance for a meeting like this. I'd like to know what would be your plan to engage people from those neighborhoods to participate in developing their own neighborhoods. We always say, equity programs always start when you have you don't get input from the people that are there, but then, you find out about what's been planned for you after it's already been planned. So, how are you going to engage people from those different areas or identify people from those areas to participate?
That's a great question. And for those who I have had the pleasure of meeting, the first thing I do when I enter any neighborhood is listen first, right? Actually, Neil said a version of this, right? So like listen, learn, and respond. right? So this is gonna require from me as well as the people who are supporting the project unit initiative and the neighborhood planning initiative for us to be the boots on the ground, as Lance like to say, going to these meetings, right? Meeting them where they are, right? And listening to them first, right? And then telling them about this process, right? So one of the next steps items from after this meeting is, Q1 2022, we are actually going to be deployed to the different neighborhoods, and we're going to be giving the same presentation, right? So that's going to require me and my team to come up with engagement strategies, right? Not in the box engagement strategies, but out of the box engagement strategies. I actually heard that, Columbus Square, Park Square are some of the hardest neighborhoods to engage, right? I'm still new to St. Louis, right? I don't know much about those neighborhoods. That requires some grace on the part of you all, but it's going to require me to really roll up my sleeves, I don't have boots on today, but get my boots on the ground, get in there and really understand what's going on. What is the lived experience of these people? And, how are they even going to perceive, this presentation when it's given to them, right? So it's that balance, right? For those of you who don't know, I actually went to school for social work, right? So how do we meet those immediate needs while also getting people to think about the future and future development? So does that answer your question?
No.
Okay. Let me try again.
I'm trying to understand what's the draw. How are you going to give them? You can talk about, once we're here, we can talk and have this discussion. But how are you going to get them to the table in the first place?
It's been an awful lot of talk.
How do you get them in the room?
It's been an awful lot of talk, and we're talking 2 more years of talking, right? Before there's money behind it.
Because there has to be some type of plan to actually get the people there, so you can hear what they have. So you can send out a bunch of surveys. But if nobody responds, you can't get the people to actually engage. So my question is, how do you plan to get them to engage?
That's a Lance's itching to say something.
So again, my name is Frank Summer. I have the privilege of leading the team that I'm creating that really is focused on responding to the question. And so I think one of the things we have to be mindful of is that the situation that we have in this entire city is one that folks are tired. So I'm going to make some recognition. I think you heard my CEO make a comment about what's happening. We have to sit in there as an organization and recognize that pain, first and foremost. Second of all, I have to give a team of people like Juwan and others who I'm trying to hire, share the information about these more jobs with this group so we know people who are really in community, who understand people, and are willing to be present. I want you to send them to me so we get the job. Second, getting people out is also more importantly about how do we understand the people. The notion of meeting people where they are is kind of physical. We have to emotionally meet people where they are. And sometimes that does require us sitting in space, listening, but then we can go to action. So I think folks said the planning process will take up to 2 years, but I can guarantee you that my team will be looking to activate things as they come up in conversation to make sure we're making progress. So the sister here, you asked a question about getting access to property rebuild. We're going to have that conversation before the plan is done. We're not waiting until the plan is done. And so just know that there is a progressive process that we have to engage, listen, and learn, but we can also do some work as we're walking. So this is a journey. St. Louis didn't get this way overnight, and we're not going to rebuild it overnight, but you have a team of people and leadership in SLDC who's committed to be present to do the work every single day. And it might take a resident like you to walk with me to a house someday and engage someone who says, I don't care what SLD says, right? So I can sit in front of them and understand what that is so I can do something about it. So this isn't pretty work. If someone thought that real community engagement is fun or pretty, they told you a lot. This is some of the messiest work known to man, and it requires us to be present, to hear frustration one day at a time, try to heal by doing action. And so, yes, we will have an economic justice action plan that will roll out, but we're not waiting for it to roll out. I am building a team to be able to be on the ground by the time that design hits. We'll have people on the ground asking these questions across this entire city. So I just want to make sure you all understood that I hear you, but I also know I want you to understand it's going to take a process and time for us to really undo some of the things that cause the pain that people feel in the city. And we hope that you all can be champions and advocates to say, I think that Lance guy who's seen it, okay, give him a shot and let us be present for a moment to figure out what we can do next. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit more strategically and directly, but this is hard. And I don't have a magic answer to tell you that it's going to be perfect. We're going to have a set of engagement. We're going to have 100 people at every event. People got real stuff going on. And we got to recognize that and find ways to either get on doors, go where people already meet. I know that most folks go to church on Sunday. We got to go to church sometimes, maybe just sit and worship for a little bit and ask the pastor for a time to talk to the congregation. That's the kind of stuff we have to do as we move forward. So if you have ideas, please. Joanna's information is at the end of the survey and we'll make sure it's available. But use her as your first point of contact and she has 100% support 24 hours a day. So we'll get it one step at a time.
I think that was spot on, exactly what Lance said. But I also want to recognize that we have done a lot of planning. We've done a lot of talking years after years after years, and I've been in St. Louis my entire life and I understand that challenge. And in this moment where we have historical amount of dollars flowing into our city, how can we be advocates on the behalf of our residents in our neighborhoods? And that's exactly what these conversations were about. As we were allocated $40 million in new market tax credits at SLDC. I'm looking every day to how do we invest that into North St. Louis City, into neighborhoods that are the ones in which you all represent and live in. Those dollars have not been historically invested in our underserved communities. That's why our economic justice action plan is so critical for us to now use those tools and those resources and those dollars that are flowing to our city to address many of the needs and concerns that you all have today. And so in this moment, it's more pressing than ever that you raise your voice and understand historically that has not always been heard or acted upon. But that's our plan, is to actually take action. It's no longer just listening for the sake of listening and planning for the sake of planning. We want to do something, but we cannot do it without strong input from the community. So what we're asking for is input so we can advocate for those dollars to be appropriated to the needs that, to meet the needs of those who have historically marginalized in the neighborhoods that have not seen that type of investment. So that's what I think is different in this moment than previously, is that we actually have the money and the resources to take action and make those dreams and those visions and those plans actually become a reality. And I'm excited about that.
So I want to pause. We have a couple of questions online. So we have one more. We'll take one more here. We have 2 questions online.
Good evening. I want to address a couple of these ladies' concerns about how to get to the table. My name is Andre Logan. I'm wearing a couple hats today. I pastor a church right next door to Vashon. We also have a neighborhood association with Jeff Vanderbilt, Old Area 2. We meet once a month, the first Monday of every month. We were gathering a lot of momentum and then COVID hit. So we've been doing virtual meetings. I also, and what this young lady addressed, we also have a Project 180, which is the 501c3 neighborhood development company. And so how you get to the table, if you're going to be doing the neighborhood planning, I know they'll be reaching out to the neighborhood associations. So one of the ways that you would get to the table to be part of that is to be part of a neighborhood association that we're going to be at the table at these meetings. And one of the things I like about what you guys are doing is that you're doing the neighborhoods plan specifically, like the Jeff Vanderbilt is going to have its own neighborhood plan, which is good. So you ladies need to get my information while I leave so you can become a part, or at least start participating with our association, and then we can start being a part of that planning process.
So we've already been having conversations around the type of development and what needs to be seen and what needs to be realized. So again, I'm excited about the activation. People that know me, I'm not just a planner, I'm actually a doer. I want to see results happen soon.
Okay, so first question is, if the Rams settlement is part of the total dollars for the neighborhood plan, what is the city of St. Louis receiving from the $790 million settlement?
Do we still need this mic before we answer that? Can folks heard that question? Yes? Do we still need the mic? Okay, awesome. Repeat that one more time and I'll repeat the mic.
If the Rams settlement is part of the total dollars for the neighborhood planning, what is the city of St. Louis receiving from the $790 million settlement?
Right, so if the Rams, I forgot to say, oh my, if the Rams settlement is part of neighborhood planning, what is the city of St. Louis receiving?
Yes.
How much? I think the question is how much of the seven.
How much of the $790 million is the city of St. Louis?
So that's still being negotiated right now between the city, the county, and then the attorneys also that represent the city of St. Louis as well.
So I think the other part is the question is, I think is the settlement money paying for neighborhood planning?
No, so we have funds already set aside for neighborhood planning through our economic development tax that was passed several years ago. And that money's already been allocated, earmarked, thanks again in partnership to our team in planning, PA, so we have those funds set aside for the planning. The dollars in which we have from ARPA, the infrastructure bill, the round settlement, and others will go towards the actual activation and not just the planning. So the planning dollars are already in place. Now we're looking to really allocate the resources that we have in place to actually move those plans into reality.
I want to read the second question. What will you be willing to ensure that none of our neighbors will be forced to move through the use of eminent domain?
So that is a process that, again, as we go through the neighborhood planning work, we would have to uncover. What I will guarantee is that we will have fair engagement and that we will not displace or take anyone's property without, again, as the lady spoke earlier, paying a premium. But our plan is to really focus on how does the residents and the owners of property and land today ultimately reap the greatest economic benefit. So the opportunity right now is to ensure that people stay in place rather than displacing them, whether it's through increasing taxes, housing them out the market, or also eminent domain. Our goal and priority is to make sure that residents actually be able to stay in place.
Thank you.
So we are in the process of establishing a neighborhood anti-displacement fund. So if you have an increase in your taxes, if you need home repairs, we've already started making additional investments in earmarking dollars for those specific purposes. So if there is an increase, for example, with the senior that has that's on a fixed income, but now because of the development that's happening around their home, their assessed value may increase, which will result in a higher tax dollars. So our goal is to be able to have funding in place to support those residents to ensure they're not displaced. We're also allocating more dollars towards our Healthy Home Repair program to be able to provide grants to seniors and low to moderate income households to ensure they're able to fix up their home and meet the necessary code requirements and ordinances that we have in place. No, but I think that's a great point, and that's the type of feedback that we need to incorporate into the plan. So as we're moving things forward, we have funds set aside to address those needs specifically. So that's the type of feedback that we need. If we have programs like the Healthy Home Report program, like the tax increment support programs that we're putting in place, if they're not sufficient, we need to understand what are the challenges and create programs that actually work to keep them in place.
Whatever else you do, like, everybody, things like, they are like the neighborhood. So we try our but the other thing is that we have to face the community.
Right. Yes, yes, it's true. I agree. I think you need to work for down the road. If you may need some support. No, but on a serious note, though, that's. No, and so this is the feedback that we need to take that action. You say you want to block, you want to create a community block group. We can create that together. We can work on that together because they will need capacity building. We've been having conversations with how do we create workforce programs that actually help the landscape. How do we pay the residents, the students that live in these neighborhoods to do that? I understand that, but it will take us to be at the table, having those conversations and creating the action plan and putting them in place. I understand your concerns. I take them very seriously because I've been living in North St. Louis City for over 30 years. My parents still live there to this day. I understand that. I've seen the evolution. I've seen the decline. So I understand the concerns and I take that very seriously. So I apologize for perceiving that as being a joke, but I promise you that we are taking this process very serious and we're advocating for resources in order to accomplish exactly those things that you're putting forward. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that feedback again. I do take it personal because I love this city dearly. But I also we have our agenda too, and that's creating equitable opportunity for all of our residents. And so that's what we're working for. And I know that's what this team is fighting for every day as they show up to these community meetings. And I know the conversations that I'm having as a cabinet member for the mayor, working with her on crafting legislation policy for development. I want to see our residents, you all in this room, benefit from this development, and not just the large developers and the large projects. I want to see actual people working, making strong incomes, seeing families thrive, seeing our St. Louis public schools come back to prominence. Those are the things that we all want to see together, but we have to work together to make that happen. So again, I appreciate that feedback and look forward to partnering with you all on moving it forward. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I think everybody here loves the city. And we would be here tonight.
Yeah.
And we know that the planning process can't go up and down. And really, crime, drug trafficking, all that stuff exists kind of around us. And, you know, if this plan comes to God, if we can't address all of those issues.
Can you go to the mic, my friend? So
Yeah,
that's
sorry,
what
we have
folks
people
online.
on Zoom who would love to hear these comments and.
I guess I should have identified myself. I'm John Bergnassi. I'm old life. I've lived all my life in this neighborhood. And over the past 5 years, I've seen changes. You know, changes that have not been for the good. And we need to address those within the context of the plan so that we make this not an up and out neighborhood, but a steady and growing neighborhood for young people like the young man that talked here earlier, so that generation is lost in this. Now, you know, we talk about the MDA as a big asset, and I don't want to see it become a federal silo where people come from Chesterfield or Belleville or somewhere else. They're ensconced in this web of protection, and then they're gone. And whatever they would have contributed to us living around them is not available to us. So we need to work to make those institutions live within the neighborhood rather than just stay within the neighborhood. And for those of us that are seniors that have contributed, we want to see things get better. We want to see things get better, not just for us, because we will be gone, but for other generations, so that there's less time. You know, in a couple of weeks, it'll be New Year's. And you know what happens on New Year's Eve? They'll be shooting. They'll be shooting. And I know that when you shoot in the air, it comes down. I've got a bunch of slugs that come out of my roof. Now, you know, people get shot. It's crime. And I know we can't address this tonight, but we need to have these social workers, mental health people to work with us to say, okay, anonymity is our enemy. People that come from who knows where and say that the city is a playground where you don't have to stop for stoplights or stop signs. You don't have to have a license. You don't have to do anything. You just have to come and have a good time. And if you have a vendetta with somebody, you can shoot up the neighborhood and be gone. That can't keep happening. You know, I understand you can't address all of this, but it's a concern that weighs on us. And I don't think anybody agrees that you should live in a neighborhood where gunfire happens. The mayor a few weeks ago had a press conference that was interrupted by gunfire. And she mentioned that she and her son fall asleep to the lullaby of gunfire. That's no good. It can't be like that. It's not Dodge City in the 19th century, the Wild West show. We have to have something right there so that people feel safe and secure and can build a future here, not somewhere else here.
Thank you, sir.
So I think we're going to take, we are at 7:30 now. I think we're going to take one more question from the audience here in person and then one more online. more online, and then we'll be good. Did you have a question? Yes.
My name is Maria Patton, and I live in St. Louis City, but I do not live in any of these neighborhoods. I have, however, recently purchased an investment property in North, and I've had that building now for just over a year. And one thing that is becoming increasingly, or that I'm becoming increasingly aware of, is the problem of absentee landlords. And that's something that I don't think we have 2 years' time. I know that we said we're going to put some things in place, but I'm watching buildings in this neighborhood, I'm watching buildings in this neighborhood go up in flames on a weekly basis, right? And they're right next to homes of people who are living in them. So I'd like to know if there's something that could be put in place for those absentee landlords, such as Paul McKee and his North Side, whatever it's called, generation, whatever it's called, because he's still purchasing and land banking properties in these neighborhoods. And when you have folks that live there and that want to acquire more space or build their own homes, they're unable to do that because they look for what's available, and there's nothing available because it's all been land banked. So I would like to see something put in place immediately for folks who truly are just sitting on that land and hoping, right, for the day that without their work and their input, that they'll be able to cash in.
I would say there is some measures that we're starting to put in place. We are partnering with the legal services of Eastern Missouri and starting to file nuisance suits against absent landlords, in which those properties are then converted to to ownership to a nonprofit organization or neighborhood-based organization within that neighborhood. So we've started to see that process already come into play within Old North, within Hyde Park as well, and just a couple neighborhoods within Project Connect. So we're starting to take action. It's not enough, but we need to continue to put legislation in place in order to convert those properties from those absentee landlords that are land banking into creating more active real estate projects that really help stimulate the community and bring back pride to those areas. So we're working on it. We have more work to do, but we're starting to take measures to move in the right direction.
So this question is along the line to the lady's last statement. What is the status of the lawsuit versus Paul McKee to strip his development rights?
So there's still a pending lawsuit right now between Paul McKee and SLDC. I really can't speak on that publicly right now, but there's still ongoing litigation happening there.
And then the next question is, we need legally binding partnerships. Can you guarantee the plans and agreements will be binding?
I don't know if Cecilia or if John wanted to answer that question directly, but I know as part of the planning process, the objective is to adopt these various neighborhood plans into the overall strategic land use plan. I'll let Cecilia respond.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I would just say that two things. Yes, we are doing this in a way that we want to adopt these plans at the end of the process, so that when we review developments that come to us for requests, whether that's for tax abatement or for a rezoning request, anything like that, that we would be reviewing the request against the plan to make sure that it is in conformity with what the community wants to see. That's one thing, but the other thing is the way that we're structuring the planning process. We're doing it in a way that we want to integrate discussions with different departments in the development of the plan, so that they are at the table in assessing what is achievable, what they can do, and really pushing the buttons on, okay, if this is what the community wants to see, how do we make that possible? We don't want them to come to the table and say, no, no, no. We want to have conversations around, okay, if that's not possible, what can we do to achieve the overall vision of the community? And they're at the table to make sure that it's, that they can follow through on it in the long run. So we're trying to build this in a way that the folks who will be implementing, not just city departments, but also community organizations, residents, developers are also in these conversations so that we know what is ultimately feasible in the long run.
So you don't leave, I think the next question might be for you and Don. We want to know, is the neighborhood planning team aware of the long-standing history of St. Louis City historically Black neighborhoods? Is the first question. And the second part is, and if so, is gentrification part of the neighborhood plan?
Gentrification is a tricky word. Displacement is not a part of the neighborhood plan. I think a lot of people in this room talk about wanting to bring life to the neighborhoods, and I think gentrification is a dirty word for that. But we do want that to be in whatever fashion is desirable by people who are already here. So that's the second question. The first question is about the history. And yes, there is actually a neighborhood planning strategy on our website. If you go to stlewis-mo.gov/planning, on that page, you'll find a link to a document that is a very thorough evaluation of best practices and a look at the past planning in St. Louis. We have timelines that go back to all of the planning efforts that have happened in St. Louis. It talks about what the engagement strategy was, if there was any, the top-down efforts all the way through to most recently the Design Downtown STL plan and the North Central plan that were adopted at the front end of this year, end of last year.
So do we have time for one or two more from online? Thank you on behalf of the folks online. Repeating here, as a renter, I am competing with speculators for home ownership opportunities. I don't qualify for Habitat or other subsidized homes, but I also can't compete with the cash offers from California. How can we make sure there are opportunities for those of us in the middle as well as lower income folks who want to own a home and stay here?
That's an amazing question. I'm a big supporter of home ownership and ultimately building wealth and building generational wealth, especially in our historically Black neighborhoods. To answer that question, we are devising a plan at this moment at SLDC that actually was approved. I can announce today that it was approved through our estimate and apportionment committee, $20 million towards a citywide housing fund that's specifically for creating accessible home ownership for those that are at 80% AMI or below. In many of our communities that are north of Belmore and also some areas in southeast St. Louis City that have seen a decline in home ownership opportunities. But it's not just about renting, but it's about creating accessible opportunities to home ownership. So we're creating programs that are not looking just at the bank requirements. I come from a bank, I know the restrictions that they place from an income level when they're doing underwriting credit scores. And so we're looking to really think innovatively around how we design programs to create accessible opportunities for affordable home ownership as well for those individuals who are historically placed out of the market or don't have an opportunity to build wealth in communities. So that's a huge part of our strategy in this moment.
It was effective in bringing in Black working working class families. I don't know what all the circumstances were, but something they're working.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so what you actually see in many of these neighborhoods, you see the phase one of planning done, where we bring residential, but then we don't bring the commercial. Or we bring commercial and then we don't bring the residential. So the goal is for us to really address many of those developments, such as the one you mentioned around how do we bring additional commercial space to those areas? How do we create stable housing in neighborhoods that don't have it? And so thinking about not just one house at a time, but entire blocks and entire neighborhoods to ultimately build that community and create this holistic development plan. But we're going to need that feedback and work together on accomplishing that. So I appreciate that point because that's exactly what we're aiming to achieve here. So I would say it would be for you to really reach out to Joanna or myself on how do we help bring forth the tools that SLDC has at play to be able to walk you through that development strategy. So I think one thing we have to recognize is everyone's position is very unique. Everyone's need is unique. So we can't just create a cookie cutter approach and one program that's going to have one size fits all. It's going to take intentional engagement for us and accountability on us to make sure that we partner with each member, each resident to be able to accomplish their goal. So what I would advise you to do is to provide the information to Joanna, and we can schedule a meeting to really understand what your goals are and really lay out some of the tools and resources that SLDC has at play to be able to assist with that program. Say that name once. Yes, he is. Yes, please. Yes, please. He's on last team. He's Joanna's colleague, so we'll be happy to connect.
Yeah, I think that's a great time for us to wrap up here. I know folks have more questions, more comments. I know there's some folks in the room. I would love to have some more conversations with as well. So we are going to wrap it up here. I think, I already got it up there. So there's my contact information. Take a picture of that if you need to. I got some business cards. And then, of course, my colleagues are going to be here to provide you business cards and answer additional questions too. If you are on Zoom and your question did not get answered, please email me. But I want to make sure that everybody leaves here today feeling like their questions were answered, because there's nothing like going to an event and having a burning question and you just like, you really didn't answer my question, you're like satisfied, right? So definitely, if you feel like your question was not answered by any of us here today, please approach us, have that real intentional conversation with us. And if you don't know the answer, just give us a little bit of time and we will get that answer to you guys. So, sound good? Awesome. Thank you guys for coming out. I don't know if Zoom left. If there's Zoom left, you got the Zoom for you guys. Grab that food if there's Zoom left. Turn those surveys in. And then we do have a map of the planning area out there, so feel free to take a look at that too.
You can return those outside. Joanna, just a reminder about the clickers.
Oh, yes. Do not leave those clickers. Turn those clickers in to John or myself at the front desk there. Please do not leave those clickers.
How you doing? Well, so I work